Okay, in this particular video today, I'm going to actually talk about Bing ads and their relation to running Google ads. Particularly if you're in the situation where Google ads just really aren't working good enough for you. Potentially you have, if you're measuring it already, which if you aren't measuring your ads, that's the first step to actually getting to where you want to go, as I mentioned on many other videos. But if you're getting a 2 or 3 to 1 ROI, 2 or 300% ROI on your Google ads, this method and advice I'm about to give you on this video can get you to the 800% ROI that you're ultimately looking for your brand. Pretty cool, huh? With that, not many people know about these methods here, or about Bing in general. A lot of times because they don't actually use Bing, so we're all biased against things we don't know about. And if you ask the average person, if an ad works online, the banner ads especially, do they work? They're going to say no, because they never buy anything from that. They don't think any advertising works because they never are influenced about anything. But nobody wants to put credence into, especially something that's meant there to manipulate them, if you will, to say it works or not. So anyway, Bing ads certainly do work. I'm going to explain how and why, and how you can actually get that 800% ROI that you're ultimately looking for your brand right now, to get you away from Google, and which some people actually getting to be quite a few all the time, more with Google raising their prices, that you could specifically just rely on Bing, maybe not get the sky high sales, $5 million a year sales volume that you wanted to get through, can get through Google by itself, but you could generate, let's say, $1 million to $2 million on Bing, crushing it on Bing, doing all the things that you should do that if people are on Bing aren't going to be doing, therefore putting you on the top and putting you in a position to be able to get all those sales for yourself. So anyway, Google ads not working. You could try Bing before you shut yourself out of Google search advertising or in general. The profit is actually bigger, even though the volume itself might be a little lower, specifically because not a lot of people know about it yet. And so the opportunity is really big. And for what it's worth, Bing has been there for a long time and it's still not saturated. And because of that, there's still a great opportunity. And therefore, I don't think at this particular stage, people en masse are never going to figure it out. The people making a lot of money on Google don't bother with it. They don't know what the opportunities are there. And the people who can't get Google to work, they never think of trying Bing, which is what this whole point of this video is about. So anyway, I have a short list of things I want to explain to you about Bing and, as it pertains to Google, the type of returns you can usually get there. Anyway, the first thing on that list is do people actually still use Bing and actually spend money on the advertising itself? So whereas 10 to 20%, believe it or not, still search on Bing, they have 10 or 20% of the search market of the people searching and using a search engine. Bing actually has 10 to 20%, and that varies. The number varies depending on what market you're in. If you're in a market that's predominantly still, people over the older demographic, the boomers, people, basically over 50 plus age demographic, that can be closer to 20% of your market, specifically because people who use Bing a lot of times use PCs, i.e. not Apple devices, and Internet Explorer is still set up on default with those devices when you buy it. And when you search on Internet, or when you hit home by default, the home button on your Internet Explorer takes you to Bing. And the older demographic, if this is you, I'm not, take it for what it's worth. A lot of people don't know how to download and install another browser, or that, Internet Explorer is something different than the internet. I know you guys watching the video you aren't that quite naive, but a lot of people that are in the older demographic, they think the little E symbol literally is the internet. And they click on that and they go and search something, and that's what makes up a good chunk of that 10 to 20%. And so with that said, younger people especially don't really understand why anybody uses Bing. A lot of people also use Bing because it gives an alternative to Google, and Google's results may not be the best, so they'll go over to Bing as well, or they just get like Bing's results a little bit better based upon how their algorithm works. But even though 10 to 20% people search, what I found personally here at the firm, and I have worked with over 100 clients here over the last 6 or 7 years, that only 10% of advertisers actually use it. And I actually audited probably 500 different types of accounts from a whole bunch of different industries to give you that information. Out of all of those people, out of the 550 or less are actually using it or have even said anything to me about it. For me, it's great because the very first thing I can suggest to a client is, why aren't you're making ads on Google now, why aren't you doing Bing? And then it's a turnkey extra 20% lift in the amount of profit they're making pretty much for the same exact things you figured out on Google, then applied to Bing. Not exactly, I'm going to get into in a moment, but same general ideas that work on Google will also work on Bing. If you're making money on Google and you can't make money on Bing, you've got a major problem because that 99% of the time will make you money, just so that you know. And if you're not making money on Google, you can actually make money on Bing if you just exclusively decide to go there because of the things I'm going to get into here next, which is the ROI on your ads on Bing can be 2 to 3x bigger in more than half of the niches that I found of those 100 plus companies and the 500 plus accounts that I've audited, that the return is actually a lot better on Google. And even if it's not 2 to 3 times better, it'll be 1 to 2 times better. On average, it's 2 to 3 times better. That's why I have this number here. Ultimately, sometimes it can be 5 times better return on Bing versus Google. So for that reason, why not go ahead and give Bing a try? You have nothing to lose. You could spend a few $1,000s of your, and see for, well, I want to say that's even more than what's necessary. You can go and spend $500 on Bing for all it's worth. If you couldn't get Google to work, you're frustrated, go spend $500 on Bing, see for yourself the type of return you could generate for yourself. You're not going to get the same ROI on that 500 now versus if you spend 100,000 on Bing and then on that same 500. That's certainly not the case, but you should be able to see the difference and compare what you started out on Bing to, and you'll have to think back to how Google started when you first started on that first 500, compare to the two, and then forecast it out and say to yourself, well, if I run these ads just as long as I ran the ads on Google, the return should be X number of % better than on Google, and therefore, if I do the math, it's actually worth it for me to run ads on Bing now, whereas it wasn't, worth it on Google. The reason for the 2 to 3x difference in ROI that you can get on Bing for essentially the same keywords and same demographic of people in general is that you have lower cost per click. Bing doesn't, gouge people as much for their clicks because a lot of people don't know about it or use it, and therefore they're not, if they could charge more, they would, they just can't because it's not as known about. So that's where the opportunity comes in for you. And then the higher conversion rates, the traffic. So somebody who has trouble filling out a web form, has trouble navigating, older demographics of people, they will purchase at a higher rate. The likelihood, and the reason why this works, is that if they go to your site, the likelihood that they're going to go to 5 other sites and fill out a form is a lot less than somebody that's 28 years old and is going to get moving quotes and will actually do that because they can type fast and have no problems filling out a form, and they could read fast, and they have easier time reading the font on a typical website. These are the reasons why the conversion rates are better. Not only that, but if you take Bing as a whole, because of that older demographic, and we're talking about U.S. here, but I'm sure it's different countries have their own skews on how things go. But in America, 50 plus demographic, they're the ones with most of the money. They spent their whole life working hard. Now they have the money to spend, especially baby boomers, right? So you get a higher percentage of baby boomers searching for your keywords, and therefore you will also get a better return. So anyway, there's a lot of different reasons why right off the bat Bing has a better return. And then with that, what I have written here, if you use my system, of course, that you'll actually get that 2 to 3 times better ROI. And probably, no matter what you're doing, can get a good enough return to justify keep doing Bing. So you got to first know about Bing to take advantage of it. And on top of that, you have to do the things that still, I want to say 90+% of the markets out there, you can make a suitable enough profit to keep going with it that's close to an 8-to-1 return or 10-to-1 return on your money if you try it, and if you just do the short list of things here, very, very short list of things that you can do here that 99% of people who run the Bing ads aren't going to do, so that you are putting yourself in a position in your market for the few people that do run the Bing ads to be able to that ultimately have an advantage over them that's going to put you in the way different realm of them, and therefore gives you your 8-to-1 return for the price of the traffic as it exists. What you're not going to, so physically you're going to pay less than Google just by using Bing, but on top of that, you get the advantage of being able to cherry pick out the most profitable parts of Bing, and more so, there are more profitable parts on Bing than Google, but in general, more so what I want to say here is you're going to be able to find the really crappy parts of Bing, and you're going to be able to weed those out, which is going to bring your overall return up to where you can easily get that 8-to-1 return that you're ultimately looking for on Bing that you may not have been able to get through Google. So anyway, second thing on the list here that I wanted to mention is just how to fully capitalize on Bing. So when you go out and try it, 90+% chance you're going to be able to say it works and not come back to me and say, Corey, Bing didn't work for me. First thing then I'll say is, did you try or did you actually follow the steps I gave you? So anyway, the first thing on that very short list here is just don't rely on the default import tool that Bing gives you to import your Google ads if you have them already, or what you've run ads on Google before, you have access to the account still. The idea of the tool is make it easy for you to be able to advertise on Bing, and they knew if people had to spend all the time they had to spend on Bing, given the less volume, they wouldn't mess with it. But because you could spend 15 minutes importing your Google account in full to your Bing account, with that they can get I'd say out of Bing's customers, everybody's tried Google. So a lot of people who use Google haven't tried Bing, but the people that use Bing, I want to say 90% have tried Google as well. Nobody just, unless they're already extremely experienced, like someone like we are here at the firm, they're not going to know all these things about Bing and realize that, if it doesn't work on Google, I should try Bing because it da. They don't have that information. So 90% of the people who try Bing have tried Google first. Either they got it to work or they didn't get it to work and they found a video like this and therefore through the research are going to try it. And then they'll use that import tool, and sometimes they will actually still fail because the same things that work on Google isn't to an exact degree going to work on what's working on Bing. Or let's say you got a really, really crappy return on Google and you advertise on Bing, and it was certainly better by default, but it wasn't quite as good as it could be because you also never did any work to make sure your ads are physically better on Bing after that or at the same time. So you use that import tool, that's totally fine. I'm not saying you can't use that tool, but on top of that tool, you must do a couple other things to be able to make sure that you're doing more, which getting better results and outdoing your competitors. A lot of it just business, and this especially or in general, is just doing more than the other people are willing to do. Therefore, you're getting more out of what you're able to do on Bing than somebody else. Therefore, you're increasing the likelihood that you're going to get that good return that you need much more than if you basically did little to no work, or at least just as much work as everybody else. If you do what everybody else does, you're going to get everyone else's results. And not everybody can make millions of dollars running their ads online. 10%, maybe 20% of the people that advertise on Google and Bing in general are making 80+% of the money. I know that because I've looked into this stuff, and so therefore the general golden rule about all this stuff is to look at how much effort's been put in to capture the market there, through the search ads or whatever in your space that you're trying to do, and then just do more. What is it going to take to do more? More in some markets than others. Or if you just go and say, I'll do everything, no matter what market you're in, you can also make it work. So it's just a matter of, do you want to put the effort in? If you do, you're always going to be able to do well with PPC. That's what I've mentioned a lot of times to people in other videos, and those particular techniques that go beyond what 99% of people are going to do are on the other videos explaining how to do them, and also on our site. But in general, that one thing, if you didn't do anything else, you could put unique bids on all the different dimensions in your account. So, you know, going back to the first tip, if you import all your campaigns to Bing from Google, from there you can run your ads on a very, very tight, limited budget starting out. Spending $500, you could see, assuming you have conversion tracking set up, which you'll have to do that right away before you spend any on ads, you can see exactly where the sales or leads are coming from, the age demographics, if you're in B2B, the job title, the industry, which you can also do, the gender of the searcher, the state the user's from, so on and so forth. There's a bunch of different dimensions, is what it's called, that you can then find the portion of what you spent that got the 8-to-1 return that you were looking for, or the $30 cost per lead that you were looking for, that you know through the math that you've done beforehand to get an 8-to-1 return with your close rates that you need to know how to hit. You could see exactly where it came from, and then just weed out all the stuff that did not get you the $30 cost per lead or the 8-to-1 return, and then that's it. And it's not so much an on-off thing as where you use what are called is called a bid modification formula. You could search for that. I mentioned it in other videos, but essentially you're just going to find, for instance, on mail, you'll get if you have a 900% return, you're going to be using through a mathematical formula, tell Bing you're willing to pay a little bit more to get more out of that one area than you could otherwise, and suck up more of all the traffic from that one segment of what Bing has to provide than your competitors. And then because you have the data and you're looking at it, get more of it from your market, given that your competitors only know so much about that particular segment of your market, and they're only willing to pay so much. You know more than them, therefore you can spend more, therefore you'll get more of it. Whereas the parts that don't work, you're going to tell Bing that you're willing to pay a little bit less, for female, because it doesn't return any better than a 3-to-1 return for you. And so what you're able to do is just take parts of the stuff that doesn't work as good as the target that you're looking for, and apply it to the parts that are above the mark, into where you're taking that same $500 a month budget or whatever you're starting out with, and you're getting the return that you want because you've redistributed that budget enough to where you're able to finally get that return. And to a degree that you may not be able to spend quite as much as you started out, or instead of spending $500, you could spend $300, but on that $300, you got the 8-to-1 return you were looking for, you still win. So it's just not a matter of can you get the return, it's a matter of how much will you still be able to spend once you've got your budget redistributed the way that you should, using all these different various dimensions that Bing gives you to do this, and that you can do, and everybody else in your space, 99% of them, are not going to use every piece of information that's available to them to their advantage. And with that, you have, again, you can do on a state by state, or if you're a local business, it'll be zip code by zip code, time of the day people are searching, day of the week they're searching, age, gender, and a parental status. Then you have the device, of course the keyword, and then if you're B2B, it's job title and industry. And what you're going to do is you're going to use you're going to figure out what you need for your 8-to-1 or 10-to-1 return in terms of cost per lead, or you're going to do revenue tracking through your account, and then you're going to, within each one of those areas, you're going to set a unique bid on every one of those areas I just mentioned. That's the way that I do it on every single campaign that we manage here, whether same thing is done actually on Google as in Bing. With that, nobody else, I guarantee you 99% of the people in your space, will virtually zero, are going to be doing that, because I see it all the time. Big companies, small companies, doesn't matter. They don't use all this information. I have never seen one time where they've used every piece of information they need, just the way that I told you, as crazy as that sounds, to be able to know exactly where to place their chips. And if you do it, you're going to be able to get all the spoils. You're going to for sure get the return you want. And so whereas that same thing could get you the return you want on Google, you're going to get, with the cost per click for the same type of user being lower, and more people being those users there being more serious on Bing, you're just going to get there a lot faster, to the point where maybe through that process, it'll take you 6 months through Google. You might be able to certainly get there in like 45 days on Bing. So if you have less money starting out, that money really, you're on limited funds, I would actually recommend starting out on Bing, personally. But that's up to you to decide. It's your business. And then, so anyway, just a couple more things with Bing before I finish up. If you're doing lead generation campaigns and you're not an e-commerce business, in other words, you'll set up offline conversion tracking. So through the mechanism that I just described to you, you're going to assign different bids for different age demographics, different state the user's from, or the zip code for a local business that the user's from, see what's working versus what's not working. But you're also going to then, with your leads that come in, and through what is called offline conversion tracking, you can then see, even if you're generating leads instead of sales directly on your website, you can import the leads that did turn into business, how much they were worth in terms of their revenue value, deal size, or what have you. And then you're going to use, just like an e-commerce business, actual revenue data in your account to see exactly what got the 8-to-1 return and what did not, so that it's very simple to know how much you're willing to pay for male versus female, for a mobile device versus a desktop device, and get the return that you want. And that in itself is going to give you a huge advantage over your competition, because they certainly aren't going to be worrying and messing around with that. And as you know, a lead is not a lead is not a lead. There's good leads and there's bad leads. And the average good lead is 3 to 10 times better than a bad lead. And so if you just go for what's producing a lot of leads, you're literally cutting your opportunities, potentially long-term, in about a third, as I've found on many different campaigns where we use offline conversion tracking, okay? So anyway, and then the last thing on my list is if you do e-commerce, make sure you import your shopping campaigns. Shopping works extremely well on Bing. It does on Google anyway, but it works even better on Bing by itself. So make sure you always, and a lot of people don't sometimes, some people don't sometimes realize that you can do shopping on Bing. And it is a little bit of a pain to get your product feed set up a second time, as you had to do it on Google, tedious or whatever, but it's totally worth it. You have to do that for yourself if you're in e-commerce, because the return, 15 to 1 return sometimes on those, because it's not competitive. And shopping campaigns just normally work very well because the user can see exactly what's being offered before clicking on it. Therefore, you're paying for a pre-qualified user, versus on a search ad, it's kind of blind. That's why those work better anyway. And if a person was being cheap, you're weeding those people out because they can see the price again before they click, which is another reason why those get a higher return by nature. So anyway, that's everything about Bing as it pertains to Google's not working good enough for you. Bing can be an opportunity. How do you actually use those Bing ads to your advantage to get the return you're looking for? The process that I personally use on our Bing campaigns to be able to take advantage of that opportunity in all the various markets that we've been in, and should be able to do that for yourself then, now that you have the information. I come out with a different video like this on PPC strategy, money-making strategies every single day here on YouTube. I would appreciate if you look into subscribing and watching some of the other videos, so you can ultimately become very rich doing PPC for yourself and be the one person in your market, as I was talking about before, that knows how to do all the stuff that outdoes everybody else, therefore gets the returns like nobody else is getting. If you try Bing out, you have a question, go ahead and leave me a comment. I'll be happy to comment on what you're doing if you get stuck. I also have guaranteedppc.com /blog, where there's a money-making PPC strategies blog, where I give you step-by-step instructions on how to put together these money-making strategies for yourself. If you'd like a little bit more detail on what to do to build up a campaign for your business yourself, using all the best practices that I've learned over the last 15 years doing PPC and finding out all these strategies myself, spending literal tens of millions of dollars in ad spend. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and good luck to you on your new Bing campaigns if you go ahead and do that.